Hey guys, tonight we gather beneath the sky, so clear you can almost hear the stars humming. The fire crackles, throwing slow dancing shadows across the ground. Your seats just warm enough, the night air crisp on your skin, and in the gentle flicker of light, I want to tell you a story, not of kings or kingdoms, but of something far smaller, humbler, and far stranger. The spoon. Yeah, that little curve of metal, or what we mostly ignore after soup. In 18th century West Africa, spoons weren't just tools for eating. They were symbols, spells, and sometimes the only thing standing between someone and death. Strange, right? You're probably not going to survive this tale without raising an eyebrow or two. But don't worry, the ghosts are polite. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're listening from tonight. Your town, your country, and your local time. Always love seeing who's sharing the fire. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're sitting in the village square of a small settlement by the Niger River. The stars above are thick and close, and somewhere in the dark, a drum taps lazily like a sleepy heartbeat. An elder sits beside you, bare chest, long fingers, quiet eyes, and from the folds of his wrapper, he pulls a spoon. It's old, not shiny. Wood, maybe, but polished by hands over generations. He holds it like it's sacred, and in a sense it is. This, he whispers, feeds more than mouths. You're not sure if you're supposed to smile or bow. You do both. In this part of the world, spoons aren't just spoons. They carry stories. They carry prayers. In some tribes, a spoon was the first thing placed in a newborn's hand. In others, it was buried with the dead to feed the soul in the afterlife. One clan believed that the first spoon a child touched determined their luck. Wood for wisdom, bone for strength, brass for charm. You can't help but wonder what your first spoon was made of. Plastic? Rough luck, friend. And this is no one-off curiosity. Across the 18th century, long before colonists brought their encyclopedias and skeptical noses, West African cultures had integrated spoons into their spiritual and medical frameworks in dazzling ways. You'll learn them all, don't worry. We have time. That elder? He's telling you how his own grandfather carved this spoon under a full moon while chanting the names of his ancestors. Said it made the medicine stronger. Historians still debate whether such rituals were placebo or powerful. But then again, so is most of Western pharmacology, if we're honest. In fact, many West African medical practices viewed the body and soul as a single system. You couldn't treat one without tending the other. The spoon, oddly enough, became a bridge between them. You don't inject a prayer, but you can stir it into honey with the right spoon. You're led into a small hut, cool inside, with thick mud walls and a faint smell of herbs. On a woven mat lies a boy, maybe 7, feverish. Beside him, a healer, wrapped in red-dyed cloth, murmurs as she dips a spoon into a clay bowl. The spoon has something painted on its handle. A snake? A river? You can't quite tell. She holds the spoon over the boy's lips and waits. Not for him to drink, but for the room to accept the moment. When the wind shifts through the doorway, she tilts it gently. One drop, then another. Later, you learn that this spoon has been used by her family for 6 generations. No one drinks from it except during illness. It's washed only with rainwater. One time, she says, her cousin used it to taste porridge by mistake and got a rash. Coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe the spoon holds its own rules. In some areas, spoon rituals were woven with song. You'd see a healer chant into the hollow before pouring medicine in. The idea being, the words would mix with the liquid and teach the illness to leave. Science hasn't caught up with that one yet. European traders passing through West Africa often wrote about these practices with bewilderment. One journal from 1763 described a healer stroking a spoon across a patient's arm while humming a tune most dreadful in tone. The doctor dismissed it as primitive nonsense, then noted, grudgingly, that the patient recovered in a week. Funny how those parts get skipped in the textbooks. Of course, not all spoons were equal. A gold spoon, given as a gift by an Ashanti chief, once caused a minor diplomatic incident when a British officer tried to use it to stir tea. Locals gasped like he'd tried to kiss a goddess. The spoon was quickly retrieved, bathed in smoke, and hidden away for weeks. Probably not because of germs. And then there were spoon duels. Yes, actual duels, where rival healers would test each other's spoons by stirring fire ash or watching how quickly herbs dissolved when stirred clockwise. Winner kept their honor. Loser usually had to give up healing for a year. Harsh but fair. And honestly, more civil than YouTube comment sections. It's getting late. The fire pops. Somewhere, a hyena laughs, though you tell yourself it's just the wind. The elder smiles and slides the spoon back into his wrapper. Now, he says, you know, do you? You lean back on your mat, head tilted to the stars. And suddenly, that simple, everyday thing, a spoon, feels like a spell, a question, a whisper from the past. Sleep well with that thought. You wake slowly, not from sleep exactly, but from that soft trance the fire lulls you into. The embers have dimmed a little, but the warmth still glows, and your ears are full of crickets and slow drums echoing from the hills. That elder from last night is gone, but in his place sits a young girl, no older than 12, with a calabash bowl in her lap. She smiles, shyly, and dips her hand into the bowl. What she brings out isn't food. It's a thin, shell-like scoop. Hollowed, worn smooth. A calabash spoon. And in this moment, you learn something curious. Before spoons came as we know them. Curved, carved, cast. They came as gourds. In the humid, buzzing mornings of pre-colonial West Africa, spoons weren't forged or whittled. They were grown. Calabash gourds, those squat, green things that look like bottled pumpkins, were harvested, dried, and split. One half became a cup, the other a spoon. And for many, they were enough. Light, floating in water, shaped perfectly to cradle medicine or soup. You hold one in your palm now. Its rough edge smells faintly of ash, and it feels ancient. It's a far cry from the polished metal spoons that would later be introduced through trade. The calabash didn't glint in sunlight or impress visitors, but it was local, humble, and alive in a way silver never was. The girl tells you her spoon was her grandmother's, used only on festival days when medicine and meal were the same thing. If you drop it, she says, it might not forgive you. And that's not just childish reverence. Across the region, people believe calabash spoons held memory. Not like a diary, but more like a whisper. Stir medicine with it too soon, and the memory of the last illness might seep into the new batch. Stir too late, and the gourd might forget the recipe. You're trying very hard not to breathe on it. Of course, these beliefs sound wild now. Though let's not forget modern chefs who talk to their sourdough starters and scold their Dutch ovens. Maybe the line between ritual and superstition is just a matter of fashion. Historians still debate whether the rise of carved spoons, wood, bone, metal, replaced the calabash for reasons of durability or deeper symbolism. Some argue the shift began with increased contact between kingdoms and coastal traders, especially when new materials like brass and tin entered the scene. Others think it had more to do with status. A calabash spoon was enough for soup. But for power? For healing? For spirit work? You needed something more deliberate. But even as materials changed, the idea didn't. A spoon wasn't just a utensil. It was a conduit. A tool that connected healer to patient, spirit to body, elder to child. You're brought to a large hut at the village edge, where a small ceremony is about to begin. A boy is coming of age, his first meal taken with the family's ancestral spoon. The bowl is filled with a thick porridge that smells of millet and spices. But everyone's eyes are on the spoon, not the food. It's carved from a dense black wood, possibly ebony, with 2 notches on the handle and a swirl at the base. You ask what the symbols mean. One woman shrugs. No one remembers. But we always copy them. That's the thing. The meaning might be lost, but the gesture persists. Over centuries, the ritual holds. One elder tells you about a time he broke a spoon during a meal. Not chipped, broke. Split straight down the middle. That night, lightning struck his mango tree. Coincidence, he says, but I didn't eat for 3 days just in case. Not all stories are so dramatic. Some are playful, odd. In one region, calabash spoons were used in courtship. A girl might carve small patterns into one and leave it in front of a boy's hut. If he polished it and returned it, it meant yes. If he cracked it and hung it on his door, a polite no with extra sass. You can't help but think how texting would ruin all of this. Still, even in the face of growing colonial pressure and missionary judgment, the calabash spoon held strong in many villages. Easy to make, easy to hide, easy to believe in. When metal became suspect, often associated with foreign influence, people returned to Gordon wood, not as a step backward, but as a return to rhythm, to something that grew from the land, held by the hand, and perhaps understood by the spirit. You close your eyes for a moment. The fire crackles. Someone in the distance laughs, sharp and free. And you picture that calabash spoon again, floating in a bowl, cupping bitter bark and sweet honey, waiting to become part of the body's strange, stubborn dance toward healing. And suddenly it makes sense. The spoon isn't just about the medicine it holds. It's about the hand that stirs, the lips that taste, the line between illness and faith. And under the firelight, as the gourd spoon rests once again in the girl's lap, you understand. Even the simplest things can carry a world inside. You're woken, not by sound, but by the gentle, rhythmic clink of metal on stone. The sky is just beginning to gray, that soft edge of dawn that makes everything look like it's been dipped in charcoal. You follow the sound to a clearing just beyond the huts, where a man in a red wrap and soot-smeared hands bends over a low anvil. He's a blacksmith, and in front of him, a spoon. Not just any spoon. This one gleams faintly, despite the early hour. It's thin, delicate, and absolutely not for stew. You could tell just by looking. This is a spoon made with intent. He lifts it with long tongs, lets it cool, then places it beside a dozen others lined up like little soldiers. You sit quietly on a rock, watching as he shapes another. His tools are simple: hammer, fire, tongs, and what looks like a hollowed-out termite mound acting as a forge. But the process is meditative. He doesn't speak, doesn't sing, just works focused, as if each strike must land with the right thought behind it. After a while, he notices you. He doesn't seem surprised. Travelers drift in all the time here. Dreamers, learners, the occasional spirit, if you believe the local gossip. He nods at the lined-up spoons. Not for soup, he says. You nod back. Healing. He smiles, not quite confirming. But you notice a few spoons are engraved with tiny dots, almost like constellations. Another has a twist at the neck, almost serpentine. One spoon, shorter than the rest, has a notch in the bowl, making it useless for holding liquid. Used to extract bad air, he says, as if it's obvious. You blink. Like literally bad air? He shrugs. Spirits. Or just gas. Who knows? This is the charm of it all. No one's quite sure where the practical ends and the spiritual begins. Historians still debate whether smiths like this were intentionally crafting for medicine, or if the spoons were simply repurposed by healers after the fact. Some evidence suggests collaboration between blacksmiths and spiritual leaders. Others say the smiths just like to mess with curious foreigners. Either way, what's undeniable is the reverence. The belief that the metal could hold something, an intention, a prayer, a memory. You see one spoon with a tiny hole drilled in the handle. The smith says it was used to blow powdered herbs into a patient's mouth. Precision medicine, 18th century style. Don't try this at home. As he works, you ask if every spoon he makes is for medicine. No, he says, some are for tricking Frenchmen. Apparently, there was a time when visiting European traders became obsessed with local medicine tools. They'd offer absurd amounts of cloth, alcohol, even muskets in exchange for a single healing spoon. Some healers, offended, refused. Others got creative. They commissioned smiths to make decoy spoons, beautiful, ornate, and completely meaningless. One such spoon, according to legend, now sits in a museum in Lyon, labeled Ritual Fever Extractor. It was actually used to measure palm wine. You can't help but chuckle. The smith winks at you. He lifts a newly cooled spoon and runs it through a bowl of ash. To neutralize it, he explains, before use. This part is consistent across many regions. Whether wood, metal, or a calabash, the spoon must be reset between patients. The belief was that remnants of illness or spiritual disturbance could linger, not just physically, but energetically. Ash, smoke, or even salt water were used to cleanse the tool. And if a spoon ever broke during treatment, you buried it deep. The smith tells you one more thing before you leave. He once forged a spoon for a healer who treated a royal family. The healer demanded it be made under a lunar eclipse and hammered in complete silence. No talking, no humming, no farts. The smith had to shoo away a goat mid-process because it was chewing too loudly. The spoon, reportedly, healed a boy who hadn't spoken in 2 years. But, he adds dryly, maybe he just hated conversation. You thank him, and he gives you a small, rough forged spoon, not for use, but for remembering. Its bowl is shallow, its edges uneven, but somehow it feels right in your hand, heavy in a way your mind can't quite explain. You walk back slowly, spoon tucked in your sash. The sky is brighter now, birds starting to stir, and as the wind picks up, you swear the spoon in your pocket gives a tiny, musical clink, like it's approving of the journey ahead. The wind is picked up a little now, rustling through the trees with that hushed, leafy whisper that feels like someone sharing a secret just out of earshot. You sit cross-legged beneath a twisted acacia, tracing the outline of that rough forged spoon in your palm. It's warm now, oddly so, maybe from the sun, or maybe from the stories it's soaked up already. You're not alone. A healer joins you. Older woman, broad shoulders, and hands like bark. She carries a bundle wrapped in faded blue cloth. When she opens it, what you see isn't a collection of eating tools, but a gallery of talismans. Spoons, yes, but each unlike the other. One is carved from pale bone, smooth and curved like it grew that way. Another is dark wood, with a tiny figure etched into the handle, its arms raised, its mouth open in eternal surprise. A third is delicate, its bowl thin as a fingernail, made from what looks like turtle shell. These, she says, are the ones that still listen. You try not to be obvious as you glance sideways, as if one of them might blink. She tells you each type of material carries a different resonance. Bone for speaking to ancestors, wood for plant medicines, horn for the stubborn fevers. Metal? Too loud, she says, except when it isn't. It's all about balance. Sometimes silence is medicine. The funny thing is, she's not unique in this view. Across vast stretches of West Africa during the 1700s, healers held firm beliefs that the material of the spoon influenced its effectiveness. It wasn't just about delivering the herb mixture. It was about how that delivery harmonized with the spirit of the illness. Historians still debate whether this was symbolic logic or practical chemistry. After all, bone and horn have different thermal properties. Maybe they cooled liquids more slowly. Maybe would absorb trace compounds. Or maybe, just maybe, people understood something that never made it into Western textbooks. You're handed a wooden spoon and invited to participate in a demonstration. The medicine is harmless, just a tea made from local bark and dried mint leaves. But you're told to hold the spoon under your tongue first. To greet the body, she says. Then you're instructed to blow on it softly, as if warming your breath. Then sip. It's bitter, weirdly bitter, like chewing on a dandelion soaked in coffee. You try not to cough, and she chuckles. It will listen better next time. She shows you a ceremonial spoon made from carved ebony, used only during solar eclipses. It's heavy and cold, with 3 dots along the handle. When you ask what they mean, she frowns. They came to me in a dream. I never ask. You want to ask more, but she stops you with a raised brow. Some things are meant to be used, not explained. That phrase lingers. You watch as she places a bone spoon across the chest of a sleeping child. No medicine involved, just the spoon resting above the heart. The child stirs, then sighs deeply, the kind of exhale that only children and monks seem to manage. The spoon stays there for 10 full minutes. Then it's lifted, washed in smoke, and wrapped away again. You ask if the spoon did something. Maybe, she says. Or maybe the child did. Again, that strange gray zone where cause and effect just hold hands and hum quietly. You're beginning to understand that here, medicine isn't always about intervention. Sometimes it's about permission, offering the body and spirit a symbol, a guide, a companion in the process of healing. And spoons, humble as they are, fill that roll with elegance. One final spoon she shows you is worn almost smooth. Its handle has no ornament, its bowl slightly chipped. But she tells you it's cured over 50 fevers. She doesn't use it anymore, just keeps it near her bedside. It knows too much now, she murmurs, and it dreams too loud. You're not sure if that's a metaphor. You decide not to ask. As she stands to leave, she hands you a tiny spoon, barely larger than your thumb. For when you need to remember, she says, echoing the blacksmith from before. You look down at the collection in your own wrap. One metal, one wood, one carved from gourd, each gifted without fanfare, but each somehow heavier than it should be. You run your thumb along the grain of the wooden one. It's smooth, except for one tiny ridge near the edge, almost like a heartbeat frozen in the wood. You whisper to no one in particular. It's not just about what it carries. It's how it listens. You're not sure how long you've been walking, but the trees here grow taller, the light softer. It's cooler in this grove, and something about the stillness makes your steps slow automatically, like you've entered sacred ground. You follow the sound of water, low, steady, and soon reach a clearing where a wide, knotted baobab stands alone like a sentry. Beneath it, 4 spoons are arranged in a perfect cross, each one pointing outward like compass points. No people, just spoons, just silence. You freeze, not because you're scared, but because something tells you this isn't a setup for a picnic. A soft voice startles you. An old man emerges from behind the baobab, barefoot, with a faded green sash tied loosely around his waist. He doesn't greet you, just glances at the sky, then at the spoons, then at you. Rain's late, he mutters, then gestures for you to sit. So you do. The ceremony, as it turns out, has already begun. The 4 spoons, he explains, are part of a ritual used by his people to summon, or at least invite, rain. Each spoon represents a direction, yes, but more importantly, each represents an element of the community. The elders, the children, the healers, and the strangers. You blink at that last one. He grins. You count. Each spoon is unique. One carved from wood, another from horn, another metal, and the 4th? A calabash shard, curved and brown with age. They're placed not just randomly, but at specific angles under the tree, right where the roots crack the earth. A gourd of water sits nearby, untouched. Now the old man hums. Not a song you recognize, just a low, looping rhythm that mimics dripping water. He walks a slow circle around the baobab, passing each spoon in turn, letting a few drops of water fall from the gourd onto each one. You watch closely as the water beads, pools, then runs into the earth. This is medicine too, he tells you. Not for the body, but for the land. The spoons act as witnesses. They carry the intentions, the hopes, and if they're positioned properly, if they're treated with respect, they might carry the request to the sky. Historians still debate whether these ceremonies were symbolic or practical. Some say they were rooted in early meteorological observation, subtle signs from nature the elders had learned to read. Others argue the rituals created a collective psychological readiness, a sense of control over the uncontrollable. Then again, maybe it just rained sometimes, and maybe the spoons helped. Who's to say? The man lifts one spoon, the horn one, and holds it to his forehead. His eyes flutter closed. This one belonged to my grandmother, he says, not opening them. She used it to feed my father the day he stopped coughing. You resist the urge to ask if it was the soup or the spoon. Then he takes the calabash spoon and presses it gently into the soil beside the tree. This one is for the children not yet born. The metal spoon he tosses into a clay bowl filled with ashes. For the ones we lost last drought. And the wooden one? He hands that to you. Your first instinct is to hold it like a utensil, but he corrects you, tilting your hand so the bowl faces skyward, like a cup waiting to be filled. This one, he says softly, is for you. The weight is ordinary, but the silence that follows isn't. It hangs there between you and him, between you and the tree, between the sky and the cracked earth beneath your feet. In this suspended stillness, you start to see why a spoon might matter. It holds, it offers, it serves, it receives. And sometimes if the wind is right and the heart is open, it asks. You sit with that for a long while. The hum continues. The air doesn't grow heavier, but it feels like it could. A single bird calls overhead, and the man finally speaks again. If it rains tonight, the spoons will stay, he says. If not, we try again in 7 days. You nod, though part of you wants to ask what happens after 7 days if the skies stay dry. But you don't. You already know. He'll come back, rearrange the spoons, try a different bowl, a different chant, and keep going. That's how people survive droughts and disappointment, one ritual at a time. As the ceremony ends, he gathers the spoons, carefully, reverently, and places each back into a worn cloth wrap. Only yours remains in your hand. Keep it, he says. Might not bring rain, but it listens. And as you walk back into the trees, you can't help but glance upward, just in case. The sky doesn't open that night. No rain, just a restless breeze, a few muttering clouds, and a quiet so thick you could slice it with a spoon. But by morning, you're back in the village, seated beside a small fire outside, a circular hut with ochre walls and a grass roof. The smell drifting from the doorway is unmistakably bitter. Herbs boiled far past what any reasonable tongue would call tolerable. You wrinkle your nose. Someone behind you chuckles. Bitter heels, a woman says, stepping out. She's middle-aged, with sharp eyes and an apron stained the color of old leaves. Sweet delays. She carries a carved wooden spoon with a long handle, far too long for any cooking pot you've seen, and dips it into a clay bowl filled with a foul-smelling mixture. You prepare for another one of those symbolic rituals from yesterday. But this time, things move quickly. She calls over a boy, maybe 9 years old, coughing and looking utterly betrayed by the world. He hesitates at the sight of the bowl. You don't blame him. Whatever's in there smells like boiled socks and wet tree bark. But what happens next is delicate. Ritual, yes, but practical too. She taps the spoon against the rim of the bowl 3 times. Talk, talk, talk. Then tips it carefully to the boy's lips. He winces, but doesn't pull away. 1 sip. 2. A breath. Then the 3rd. And that's it. No chanting. No smoke. Just spoon, sip, silence. You look around and realize a few other bowls sit nearby, each paired with its own spoon. Some are carved from light wood, some dye darker, one from what looks like polished bone, each used for a specific type of ailment. Fever, stomach cramps, bad dreams. But the spoons aren't interchangeable. That's the point. The woman explains. The spoon teaches the body what it's taking in. You don't mix teachers. It makes a strange kind of sense. The healer's toolkit here isn't just about the what, but the how. The medicine isn't just the bitter leaves. It's the way they're introduced, carried, delivered. Historians still debate whether these specific spoon pairings were developed through centuries of empirical knowledge, or if they arose more from symbolic traditions. But one British observer in 1769 noted that the same herbal mix, when delivered by a different spoon, was said to change its effect on the spirit. That same observer also tried the remedy and promptly passed out for 2 hours, so grains of salt all around. You're invited to try a different tea, this one for clarity of thought. The woman pours it with a spoon shaped like a fish. You ask why. She shrugs. Because fish swim through confusion. You raise the bowl. The tea is warm, slightly less bitter than the previous one, with a faint minty sharpness underneath. You don't feel particularly more clear-headed, but you do feel oddly lighter. Maybe because the act itself feels respectful, like being trusted with something old. She wipes the spoon clean with a strip of cloth dyed with indigo and charcoal. We only rinse with river water, she says. No well water. No boiled. Why? Well, water forgets. River remembers. You don't question it. Not anymore. She offers a glimpse at a small journal, drawings of spoons and their uses. No formal writing, just symbols, patterns, notes like, use when moon is low, avoid on red days, broken bowl equals wait 3 days. It's not a manual. It's a conversation between generations. In the back of the hut, behind a veil of hanging beads, there's a small shelf with spoons she no longer uses. Some too old, others retired after complicated cases. One spoon has a small crack in its handle. She says a child bit it during a fever dream and hasn't been sick since. She keeps it out of circulation, just in case it worked too well. There's one silver spoon in the mix, oddly ornate. A gift from a French merchant, never used. Too cold, she says. Medicine flinches. You're told a story about a healer who once tried to use a brass spoon on a patient suffering from what they believed was a curse. The spoon bent just slightly as the patient opened their mouth. It was thrown into the fire immediately. The spoon said no, she says matter-of-factly. You step back out into the sun, your own thoughts steeping like tea. The image of a child sipping medicine from a carved spoon stays with you. You wonder how many lives have been changed by that simple act. One spoon, one sip, one chance to feel just a little better. The sun hangs high today, but the air remains oddly cool. A breeze teases the tops of the trees, and for once, the insects are quiet. You're led away from the center of the village to a quieter path, lined with tall grasses and marked with the faint sound of bells. Not cowbells, something smaller. You follow it, your feet kicking up dust, and then you see him. He's standing near a tree stump, shirtless, with rows of beads around his neck and a single spoon tucked into a sash at his hip. Not in a pouch, not hidden, but worn openly, proudly like a badge. You blink. A spoon? You ask. He grins. Warriors carry blades. Healers carry spoons. You don't argue. His arms are like tree trunks. You learn that in this region, spoons were not just tools of medicine or ceremony. They were part of status, especially among warrior societies who viewed the healer's role as integral to survival. The man introduces himself as a spoon bearer, a kind of roaming battlefield medic of his time. Not just tending wounds, but diagnosing curses, cooling tempers, and occasionally calling rain to confuse the enemy. You're not sure if he's joking about that last one. He shows you his collection. 6 spoons, each tied to a different purpose. One for fever, one for wounds, one, smaller and charred at the edges, used only when someone's mind falls out of balance. Another, made of copper, was placed under the tongue of dying warriors, not to save them, but to speak for them, to help their final breath find the ancestors. You shiver slightly. Historians still debate how widespread this warrior spoon custom really was. Some call it folklore. Others point to actual weapon belts recovered from burial sites that included carved spoon holders. No forks, no knives. Just spoons. You ask what happened if a warrior lost his spoon in battle. He snorts. Same as losing your honor. You come back with your spoon, or you don't come back at all. This feels theatrical, a little too perfect, but then he sits down and unwraps a leather bundle. Inside is a spoon made from carved horn, smooth and black, with a thin crack running along its side. I used this on my brother, he says softly. He took a spear through the side. The wound healed, but he wouldn't wake up. They said his spirit was wandering. He poured palm oil into the spoon and whispered his brother's name into it. Not once, 7 times. Then dripped the oil into his brother's mouth. Next morning, he says, he asked for porridge. You open your mouth to ask something, anything, but find there's nothing to say. This wasn't magic. Or maybe it was. Who decides, really? Some warriors carried spoons for spiritual protection, too. Certain tribes believed that the hollow of a spoon could trap malevolent spirits if turned upside down and buried at the right moment. Others tied a spoon around the neck during battle, not for food, but as a signal. I serve life, not death. They fought, yes, but their allegiance was to healing afterward. He hands you one of his older spoons. It's chipped and stained. You expect it to be heavy, but it's light. Light enough to forget it's there, which he says was the point. You never want to notice it in battle, but you never want to be without it either. You ask if people ever mocked the spoon bearers. He laughs. Once. Only once. And then, as if remembering something private, he goes quiet. Before you leave, he shows you a last spoon. This one made of bone, polished to a warm ivory hue. He doesn't say what it's for, just holds it for a moment in his palm, like it's whispering something only he can hear. Then he nods and tucks it back into his sash. As you walk away, you realize you're seeing the spoon differently now. Not as something gentle or domestic, but as a symbol of resolve, of presence in the face of chaos. A tool, yes, but also a weapon against forgetting. Later that evening, you're sitting with a group of women weaving mats beneath the flickering light of oil lamps. The mood is lighter here. Laughter rolls easily. Conversation dances between jokes and stories, and the air smells like roasted maize and sweet smoke. You notice, nestled among their baskets, something familiar: spoons. Not tucked away or hidden in cloth. Just there, casual, domestic. But as you lean in, you see it's more than that. One of the women, with hands quick as birds, is carving a new spoon as she chats, carefully shaping the handle with a small curved blade, pausing now and then to test the smoothness with her thumb. She smiles as she sees you watching. "For my niece," she says. "It's her first moon." You blink. "Moon. Her first period." Another woman chimes in, barely looking up from her weaving. "We mark it with a spoon." "Of course. Don't you?" "No, you do not." In this village, and others like it, certain spoons were crafted and given at key rites of passage. First menstruation, first childbirth, marriage, even menopause. They weren't just keepsakes. They were part of ceremonies, blessings, sometimes even whispered to late at night when the body felt strange or uncertain. This spoon, for example, is being carved from soft, light wood, not too fancy, not too plain, with a swirl etched at the base of the bowl. "That's for strength," the woman explains, "and the curve in the handle. That's for gentleness." It's strangely elegant. You find yourself hoping someone's carving one for you. Historians still debate the function of these so-called woman spoons. Some claim they were merely symbolic. Others suggest they were part of herbal regimens administered during times of bodily change. A 1780s Dutch traveler wrote, with no small amount of confusion, about witnessing a group of women singing around a girl holding a spoon as though it were a crown. He noted the spoon was not used to eat, but to stir scented water that she then bathed her feet in. You ask if there's a specific ritual attached to the spoon. The eldest woman in the group, gray hair in a long braid down her back, gives you a sly look. Many, but some are secret, especially the good ones. She leans in, lowers her voice. One time, a girl carved her own spoon before her moon. No one told her how, just dreamed it, used palm wood, and wrapped it in blue thread. She never once had cramps. You raise your eyebrows. She grins. Coincidence or the right spoon? Another woman laughs and holds up her own spoon, worn smooth and dark from use. Had this one since I'm married. Stirred 3 births with it, plus one very stubborn husband. You glance around. Each woman here has a spoon, or has had one. Those are not for ceremony only, but for life, an extension of the hand, the heart, the hearth. You notice how often their hands touch them, even when not in use. A thumb grazing a handle, a finger tracing the rim absently. They tell you how the spoons were sometimes used in matchmaking. An elder would inspect the wear and shape of a girl's spoon to determine her patience. Too chipped, maybe a little too quick to anger. Smooth and even, a good matchmaker. It's not exactly science, but it is, in its way, knowing. One woman shares a story about burying her mother's spoon beneath a baobab after she passed. It wasn't tradition, exactly, but she felt it was right. She stirred everything in our house with that spoon. Porridge, soap, medicine, gossip. It belonged to the earth now. The others nod. You think about the spoons in your own life. Disposable, anonymous, replaced without thought. But here, each one has a lineage, a memory, a flavor not just of food, but of feeling. By the time you leave, the niece's spoon is nearly finished. The carver holds it up to the light. "It's not perfect," she says. "Neither is growing up," someone replies. The women laugh, and somewhere in your chest, something warm and quiet settles. A spoon, after all, doesn't have to be grand to carry something sacred. Sometimes it just needs to show up, again and again, with steadiness, softness, and the willingness to be held. You wake the next morning to the rhythmic thud of a pestle pounding grain somewhere nearby. The sound is familiar now, like the heartbeat of the village, and oddly comforting. You stretch, feeling the coolness of dawn still lingering in the air. Today feels different somehow. Lighter, yes, but also stranger. You're guided toward the outskirts of the village, where the trees begin to thin and the air carries the faint scent of burning herbs. It's quieter here. The path grows narrower until it opens into a small grove, surrounded by smooth stones arranged in a half circle. In the center sits a man dressed in white robes, back straight, eyes closed, hands resting on his knees. A bowl sits in front of him, and inside it, a spoon made entirely of clay. He doesn't speak for a long time. You consider whether to sit or just quietly back away and pretend you were never here. But before you can move, he opens his eyes and gestures gently to a spot beside him. You sit, and for a while, you both simply watch the breeze stir the grass around you. Finally, he says, "This spoon is for listening." You glance at it. It looks fragile, roughly shaped, sun-dried, not fired. You could probably break it with your pinky. He picks it up delicately and turns it in his hand, as if showing it to the wind. In some places, he explains, we use this type of spoon to diagnose, not to treat. We stir it in a bowl of clean water, then watch what the water does. How it moves, what it reflects. You squint at the bowl. It's just water. Clear. Still. Then he stirs. The movement is slow, barely more than a ripple. But as the water circles, small bubbles begin to rise. He watches closely. If it bubbles early, the illness is in the stomach. If late, the chest. No bubbles? Spirit trouble. You want to smile, but you don't. Because his tone is not whimsical, it's precise. Historians still debate the meaning of these diagnostic rituals. Some dismiss them as superstition. Others point out the complex observational skills required. In certain traditions, the spoon's behavior, how it floats, how it tilts, whether it spins clockwise or not, was read the way a physician might read a chart. But unlike charts, the results came with silence, stillness, and intuition. You ask if he always uses clay. He nods. Clay listens. It's from the earth. Like us. He lets the spoon settle in the water again, then leans back and closes his eyes. Sometimes, he murmurs, the patient doesn't need the medicine. Just the knowing. Just being seen. You sit with that. The idea that a diagnosis could be its own healing. That the ritual of watching, stirring, interpreting could offer reassurance, or at least presence. He tells you a story about a young woman who came to him complaining of dreams that left her gasping. No herbs helped. No smoke eased it. Finally, he stirred the clay spoon in water, and the spoon tipped on its side without reason. He gave her a second spoon. It tipped too. The third sank. So he told her to stop coming. But why? You ask. He smiles. Because she didn't need a healer. She needed rest. And permission to stop being strong. You sit very still. He wraps the spoon in a strip of white cloth and tucks it into a gourd container, alongside a few others, some cracked, one clearly melted from the sun. You ask what he does with the broken ones. I return them to the earth. Of course, as you prepare to leave, he offers you a sliver of a spoon, just the handle, broken clean at the base. It doesn't stir anymore, he says, but it remembers. You turn it over in your hand. It's nothing, and somehow everything. A shard of story, a sliver of listening. You tuck it into your wrap and say nothing, because silence feels like the only appropriate response. As you step back onto the path, you glance up. The sun is rising through the trees, and for a moment, you swear the light itself seems to ripple, like a spoon gently stirring sky. The path back to the village winds gently, and for once, no one rushes you. The morning is generous, soft light, a breeze that smells faintly of lemongrass and cooking smoke, and a quiet hush of people not yet fully awake. You pass a row of young boys sitting cross-legged in the dirt, tracing patterns with their fingers. They're learning, you're told, to read the ground before they learn to read scrolls. You're not entirely sure what that means, but you let it settle in your brain like a pebble in a pond. And then, as you round a bend, you hear it. Laughter. High-pitched, relentless. The kind that bubbles out of children who haven't yet learned to tone it down for adults. You follow the sound to a shaded courtyard where a group of girls are gathered in a loose circle, playing a game that involves passing objects quickly from hand to hand. Pebbles, feathers, beads, and spoons. Yes, small, colorful spoons carved from soft wood and painted with bright dots. Some are lopsided. One looks like a bird. Another has a tiny face etched into the handle. These are not ritual tools. These are toys. You settle in quietly on a mat at the edge of the group. No one minds. A girl with wide eyes and a missing front tooth shows you her spoon. It's painted red, chipped at the bowl, and she's tied a bit of blue thread around the handle. She's called Nana. The girl says, "She helps me win," right? You watch as the girls play, a game of speed and rhythm. Spoons passed hand to hand in a set sequence, each beat followed by a chant. If someone drops a spoon, they're out. If they keep perfect time, they get to pick a new power, which might involve balancing the spoon on their head or reciting a riddle before the next round. The energy is pure joy. But here's the thing. The game isn't just a game. One of the older girls, sitting nearby and watching like a coach, tells you this is how they learn. Hand skills, rhythm, focus, storytelling. Each spoon has a name, and each name has a story, she explains. If you can't remember your spoon's story, you can't play. It's brilliant. Childhood disguised as education, or education disguised as fun. You ask if these games have always existed. She shrugs. My grandmother played them. Her grandmother, too. Historians still debate the function of these playful spoon games in West African communities. Some believe they evolved as mnemonic tools, ways to embed oral history into motion. Others argue they served social bonding roles, especially among girls, as spaces to practice decision-making, competition, and cooperation. Either way, the spoons were central. Not just props, but characters. One story you hear involved a spoon that belonged to a girl who never spoke. Not a word, but won every single game by sheer timing. They called her the Silent River. No one dared challenge her. When she moved away, she left her spoon behind. It's still in the village somewhere. Supposedly, another girl leans over and whispers, "My spoon dreams at night." You raise an eyebrow. She tells me who to sit next to the next day. She's always right. You want to ask more, but the round starts again. Scoops and clacks, a flurry of tiny hands moving spoons like dancers. And you realize something. This is medicine too. Not the kind that heals fever or calls rain, but the kind that teaches joy, that teaches belief, the kind that tells a child that the tool in her hand matters, that it carries magic or memory or both. You think about how early we learn to assign meaning to objects. A blanket, a toy, a spoon, and how those meanings echo into adulthood, shaping how we see the world. Eventually, the game slows. The sun rises higher. The girls scatter for food or chores, dropping their spoons in baskets or tucking them into waistbands. One girl, tall, serious, walks past you and pauses. She holds out her spoon, a small one with a handle that curls at the end like a question mark. "For you," she says. You hesitate. She shrugs. It's retired. You take it, and for a second, the world feels oddly weighted in your palm. And then she's gone, chasing her friends, laughter trailing behind her like a bright ribbon. You look down at the spoon. It's small, scratched, utterly ordinary, and absolutely irreplaceable. By midday, the heat starts to settle like a heavy blanket. The village slows, everything and everyone moving in the rhythm of the sun. Slower, quieter, deliberate. You find yourself drifting back toward the edge of the settlement, where the air smells less of smoke and more of sap and dry leaves. There's a grove of mango trees nearby, and beneath them, a man is sketching shapes in the dust with, what else? A spoon. This one's carved from bone, ivory-colored, with a worn notch at the tip of the handle. He doesn't look up as you approach. Just keeps drawing, tracing lines, spirals, tiny symbols that feel half alphabet, half memory. Eventually, he speaks without turning his head. You ever hear a spoon sing? Not the question you expected before lunch. You sit beside him. No, he smirks. You have. You just didn't know what you were hearing. Turns out he's a scribe of sorts, a keeper of stories, but not the kind that go into books. He's the kind who maps dreams. Dreams, he says, often arrive with objects. People dream of rivers and birds, yes, but also of bowls and sticks, and most curiously, spoons. Over time, he's collected the meanings attached to these dream spoons. One with a cracked bowl, that's regret. one filled with honey, a secret someone is finally ready to tell. One turned upside down, the dreamer is refusing to receive something. You glance at the spoon he's using, and that one. He stops drawing, eyes the spoon in his hand. This one belonged to my mother. She said it told her when visitors would arrive. It never lied. He explains how people come to him with their dreams, not just for interpretation, but for sketching. He draws what they describe using the spoon like a stylus, then traces the lines again and again until a pattern emerges. Once he sees the shape clearly, he can read the spoon's meaning. Historians still debate whether these practices count as medicine or spiritual philosophy. Some colonial accounts dismiss them as quaint folklore. Others, especially from Portuguese traders in the late 1700s, describe remarkable accuracy in these dream readers' ability to identify family tensions, emotional disturbances, or even illnesses. One Portuguese officer wrote in awe about a healer who correctly predicted a ship captain's death based on a dream about a silver spoon floating downriver. You watch the scribe smooth over one drawing and begin another. See this, he says, tracing a curve. That's a hunger, but not for food. That's someone missing a conversation they never got to have. You sit with that one for a bit. He tells you that the most powerful spoon dreams are the ones with no spoon at all, just the expectation of one. A hand reaching out, waiting, that, he says, is a sign of a person who's ready for truth, but hasn't found the words yet. You mention your own spoon, the small, curling one given by the girl. He smiles. That's a threshold spoon. You keep it when you're stepping into something new. Not a guide, a witness. Later, as the sun tilts toward its descent, he invites you to draw a dream of your own. You hesitate. Your dreams lately have been muddled, the kind where faces melt into landscapes and nothing makes much sense. But you describe a fragment, sitting at a table alone, spoon in hand but no bowl. Just waiting. He nods, already sketching. Empty bowls are not always lack. Sometimes they're invitation. The drawing he creates is simple, lines spiraling toward center, one lone spoon resting just outside the frame. He hands it to you, along with a folded scrap of cloth. Wrap this inside, he says. If the dream returns, draw again. If it doesn't, the spoon did its job. You take both carefully. As you rise, he adds one last thought, not looking at you. Some say the gods stir time with a spoon. And honestly, it doesn't feel impossible. The late afternoon light begins to glow gold, spilling through the trees like honey, soft and lazy. You're guided this time not by a villager, but by a goat. Yes, really. She ambles confidently down a footpath, pausing now and then to make sure you're still behind her, and finally settles beside a small, thatched hut with smoke curling from its chimney. You're starting to learn that in places like this, stories often arrive in strange disguises. Today, apparently, they have hooves. Inside the hut, it's dim but warm, thick with the scent of clove, dried ginger, and something nutty you can't place. A woman is stirring a pot over the fire, not with a ladle, but a long-handled brass spoon. It gleams softly in the flickering firelight, and you realize she's not just cooking, she's performing. Her movements are too deliberate, too rhythmic. Stir or tap, stir or tap. She greets you without turning. You came just in time for the test. Test. She chuckles. Taste test, but not for flavor. You're handed a small cup. Whatever's inside smells spicy, sharp, and strangely earthy. You sip. It's confusing. Not bad, but definitely not good in a traditional sense. Your face does a thing. She laughs harder. That's the test. If your face puckers like a turtle, it means your stomach's awake. You glance back at the brass spoon. She holds it up. We only stir certain things with this. It speaks to the stomach directly. You nod slowly, unsure if she's kidding. But there's that tone again, that quiet seriousness behind the joke. She explains that in her household, spoons are chosen not for convenience, but for resonance. She uses brass for digestion, bone for sleep mixtures, and wood for anything involving the heart. Wood remembers joy, she says, setting the spoon gently across a clay pot. You ask about the brass. Brass tells the truth, even when you don't want to hear it. Historians still debate whether materials like brass and copper were used for symbolic purposes, or if they had antimicrobial properties that enhanced their medicinal use. Some point to traditions across West Africa where metal spoons were never used for eating, only for medicine. Others suggest the type of metal mattered less than the ritual attached to it. Either way, brass spoons were revered, not for their price, but for their perceived wisdom. She shows you a smaller brass spoon, tarnished, kept in a wooden box with dried orange peel and peppercorns. This one, she says, was my mother's. She said it cured heartbreak faster than wine. A beat, not by fixing anything, just by helping you cry sooner. You love that. You ask if it worked. She doesn't answer, just smiles and starts stirring again. Next, she pulls out a basket of dried herbs. We don't add anything until the spoon agrees. You assume this is metaphor. It is not. She places the spoon in the dry leaves, waits a few seconds, then removes it and sniffs the bowl. Only then does she proceed. You're about to ask how she knows when it agrees, but decide against it. Some mysteries are best left respectfully unsolved. One corner of her kitchen is filled with spoons hung on the wall, 20, maybe more. Some painted, some cracked, some so blackened with use they look like stone. Each one is labeled with a small knot of colored string. Red for warming mixtures, blue for calming, yellow for stubborn ailments, whatever that means. You wonder aloud how she keeps them straight. She taps her temple. They whisper when I forget. She hands you a thick-handled spoon carved from dark wood, stained deep with what looks like turmeric. This one's good for memory, she says. Try it with dates and sesame, or dreams. You ask if people ever doubt the spoons. She shrugs. People doubt everything, until their stomach hurts. As you prepare to leave, she offers you a pinch of her spice mix, ground seeds, herbs, and something sharp you can't identify, wrapped in a scrap of cloth. No spoon for this, she says. You chew it. Old school. Outside, the goat is waiting. You get the sense she's proud of you for surviving the test. As you walk away, the taste still tingling in your mouth, you realize you've learned something new about these spoons. They're not always sacred. Sometimes they're just practical. But even then, they carry an intimacy, used by hands that care, stirred with intent, held by people who believe not just in healing, but in noticing. A brass spoon, stirring a bitter tea, becomes more than an object. It becomes a message. The sun begins to dip, casting long shadows across the village paths, and the warm hush of evening settles in. You find yourself wandering without direction, led more by the rhythm of the day than by purpose. Your fingers still smell faintly of ginger and pepper, and the brass spoon's memory lingers in your mind like a bell's echo. Eventually, your steps lead you to a quieter part of the village, a small, shaded courtyard where a man is sitting cross-legged on a woven mat, surrounded by bones. Not human, don't panic. These are animal bones, neatly arranged, polished, labeled with painted marks. In the center of the collection sits a single spoon, carved from what appears to be ivory or something similar, though the color has mellowed to a warm cream. He looks up, squints at you, then gestures to sit. Ever hear a hyena scream? He asks, entirely without context. You blink. Once. In a documentary. He grins. Better that way. Turns out, this man is what you might call a diviner. A reader of bones, omens, and old patterns. But unlike the scribe from before, his method involves casting. Not spells. Objects. Specifically spoons. He takes the ivory spoon in hand, holds it above the mat, mutters something under his breath, then lets it drop. It clinks softly against the bones and settles, pointing at a curved rib fragment. Ah, he says. North again. Of course. You ask what that means. He shrugs. Nothing yet, but it will. The spoon, he explains, is not the message. It's the messenger. It shows the direction, the emphasis, the pulse of what's to come. He casts alongside bones, feathers, shells, even seeds, watching what it lands on or near. It's not fortune-telling exactly. More like suggestion. You ask how he learned. My aunt. She said the spoon talked to her one day when she was sweeping, told her to sit down and listen. So she did, and then she never swept again. A beat. Not because she didn't believe in cleaning. She just knew her job had changed. Historians still debate the legitimacy of spoon casting practices, often lumping them together with West African divination systems like Ifa or Fa. But records exist of certain ethnic groups using carved implements, including spoons, to interpret cosmic or ancestral messages. One British trader in 1787 described a white utensil dropped into bones as a spirit needle, though whether he misunderstood or romanticized it is anyone's guess. You watch as the man casts the spoon again. This time it lands, pointing directly at you. He raises an eyebrow. Well, that's interesting. You want to ask what it means, but a part of you doesn't. He chuckles. Don't worry. It doesn't mean death. It just means attention. The spoon, he says, reacts to energy. Intention. Unspoken questions. And if it points to you, well, maybe you've brought one. You think about that. He shows you a bundle of spoons used over the years. Some are chipped from use, others discolored by smoke or sweat. One is wrapped in goat hide with a tiny bell attached. That one only speaks when music's playing, he says with a wink. You ask if the spoons ever lie. Oh, sure, especially if you're asking the wrong question. You have to ask the spoon, not your fear. He tosses it again. This time it spins in place before landing bowl up. That's rest, he says, or indecision. Hard to say which. You sit in silence for a moment, watching the fading light dance across the polished ivory. He tells you one final story. A woman came to him asking if she should leave her husband. The spoon pointed toward a beetle shell in the casting mat. She asked again. The spoon pointed the same way. She left. Years later, she returned with a child in her arms, healthy, laughing, full of questions. She gave him a spoon in return, made of clay, wrapped in cloth. Still warm when I got it, he says quietly. It wasn't just thanks. It was proof. You rise to leave, and he hands you a tiny bone spoon, barely 2 inches long. For travel, he says. It doesn't tell you where to go. Just helps you know when you're lost. You take it gently, unsure what to say. As you walk away, the wind picks up, scattering a few bones across the mat. The spoon lands again, this time pointing east. He doesn't call you back, but somehow he noticed. Night creeps in slow, like it's trying not to wake the village. The last sliver of sun sinks beneath the trees, and with it, the usual bustle fades. You hear soft laughter, a few low conversations, the rhythmic sound of pounding grain tapering off into the distance. And then, something new, a low hum, not quite music, not quite a chant, drifting on the breeze like warm breath. You follow it. It leads you to the village center, now dimly lit by small oil lamps and the glow of a communal fire. Elders sit in a loose circle, some leaning back, others hunched forward, all holding something in their laps. Most are holding, yes, you guessed it, spoons. Old ones, worn ones. One even looks like it's missing half its bowl. A young woman, maybe in her 20s, sits in the center with a large bowl on her knees and an unreadable expression. Tonight, you're witnessing a tradition that rarely takes place, a spoon naming ceremony. One of the elders, a woman with wrists jangling in copper bracelets, clears her throat. This one, she says, gesturing to the young woman, has stirred enough meals, brewed enough teas, and whispered into enough wine to earn her first name. You blink. First name? As it turns out, in some regions, spoons are given names after years of use. Not when they're made, but when they've proven themselves. Until then, they're just vessels. But once they've helped heal, feed, or carry someone through grief or joy, well, then they become something else. The young woman holds up her spoon. It's long, carved from dark wood, the handle twisted into a spiral. The bowl is smooth, faintly discolored, clearly loved. The elders take turns speaking. One calls it patient, another calls it steady. A third says it doesn't talk too much, but it listens like a river. Eventually, a name is chosen, Suma, meaning deep and still. The spoon is passed from hand to hand. No pomp, no flash, just quiet acknowledgement. It's oddly moving. A life, not just of a person, but of an object being honored. You ask someone nearby how often this happens. Rare, they whisper. Most spoons live quietly. Only some fine names. Historians still debate the prevalence of spoon naming across West African traditions. Some argue it was isolated to spiritual households, where tools became sacred through use. Others believe it was more widespread, especially in matrilineal communities where objects passed from grandmother to granddaughter. A 1793 missionary journal describes a healer woman who refused to treat patients unless she had her named spoon, saying, "My hands are hers now." The ceremony continues. After the naming, the young woman dips suma into a bowl of warm water mixed with palm oil and bitter leaves. She drinks 3 sips, then pours a bit back into the earth. To feed the roots, one elder says. There's no applause, just nods, the crackle of the fire, and the hum again, that same gentle sound rising and falling like a lullaby with no words. Then something unexpected happens. An elder stands and lifts her own spoon high. It's a simple thing, flat, pale wood, with a split handle bound in thread. "I name mine Toba," she says, because she survived the burning house. The others murmur. Apparently, this isn't standard, but no one stops her. Another elder follows. "Mine is Lelu. She kept a child alive through 3 famines." One by one, more rise. "Afari, Noma, Gindu." You realize something beautiful is unfolding. An impromptu naming of tools long silent. Some spoons are held aloft like trophies. Others are lifted gently, shyly, as if unsure whether they deserve it. But they all shine in the firelight, each one carrying not just a name now, but a story. Eventually, someone asks if you have a spoon. You pause, then pull out the tiny bone one the diviner gave you. Silence. Then someone says, "That one is still listening." You nod, and in that moment, you don't feel like a guest anymore. You feel like a witness. By the time you rise the next morning, the village is already busy. Not bustling, never frantic here, but humming with the slow-motion choreography of daily life. Water carried on heads. Smoke curling up from cook fires. Children chasing goats. Goats chasing their own shadows. You stretch, feeling the familiar ache of sleeping on woven mats, and an even more familiar reluctance to leave this world of gentle rhythms and spoon-shaped mysteries. Today, you're taken to a house built partly from red earth and partly from stories. Or at least, that's what it feels like. The woman who greets you is dressed in layers of faded cloth and wisdom. Her eyes, so sharp they might cut through your questions before you speak them. She's known, you're told, as the keeper of the laughing spoon, which, of course, makes perfect sense by now. She invites you in with a nod, not words, and you follow. Inside, the walls are lined not with books or baskets, but with dozens of small shelves, each holding a single spoon. No two are alike. One has a spiral carved into the bowl. Another is painted with what looks like starlight. One is entirely wrapped in what appears to be snakeskin, though you don't ask for confirmation. She notices you staring. They all have stories, she says, but one of them tells jokes. You wait. That's it. No further explanation. She motions for you to sit, then brings over a small wooden box and opens it slowly. Inside is a plain wooden spoon. Almost too plain. No carving, no decoration, no magic glare. But when she sets it down between you, something about it feels mischievous. Like it knows something you don't. Like it wants you to ask the wrong question. "This is the laughing spoon," she says. "We only use it for difficult guests." You try not to shift uncomfortably. Turns out, the laughing spoon is used in a tradition that historians still argue about. Somewhere between therapy, confession, and spiritual mischief. When someone in the village becomes too serious, too full of pride, or secrets, or silence, they're invited to dinner with the keeper. And the laughing spoon. Here's how it works. The guest is served a meal. But instead of a normal spoon, they're given this one. And every time they try to speak a falsehood, or dodge a truth, or complain about someone else's behavior without acknowledging their own, the spoon clinks against the bowl in a very particular way. It sounds absurd, yes, but she swears it's never wrong. You raise an eyebrow. Magic, she shrugs. Reflection. She tells you the story of a man who came to her house after years of not speaking to his brother. Full of rage, full of ego, The laughing spoon clinked on his first 3 sentences. By the fourth, he was crying into his porridge. By the fifth, he was laughing. Not because things were fixed, but because the weight had finally shifted. You pick up the spoon. It's light, balanced, a little too easy to hold. She watches you. Be careful. It doesn't like flattery. You quickly put it down. Historians still debate the role of humor in healing practices across West Africa. Some argue that laughter was used ritually to shake loose emotional blockages. Others believe that satire, teasing, and subtle mockery were essential tools for maintaining balance within a community. The laughing spoon, whether literal or symbolic, represents that razor-thin edge between truth and nonsense. She shows you other spoons too, one used for reconciliation ceremonies, where two people must eat from the same bowl at once without speaking. Another used during group storytelling, passed from person to signal who speaks next. And one, the tiniest of all, used to feed only the first spoonful of a newborn's first real food. The rest, she says, is the world's responsibility. But the first bite belongs to us. You sit for a while, absorbing it all. It's funny how much meaning has been stirred into these simple tools. How much emotion can be carried in something small enough to fit in your palm. Before you leave, she wraps the laughing spoon back in cloth. It stays with me, she says, but you can visit. If you ever start taking yourself too seriously, you promise you will. And as you walk out into the now busy village square, you swear you hear a soft clink behind you, like a spoon, laughing quietly. The day stretches out before you like a long, sun-warmed path, dusty, unhurried, lined with curious glances and the low murmur of conversations you're not meant to understand. Not yet. You follow your guide, this time a boy no older than 10, who insists on walking backward the entire way, explaining that spoons don't trust people who always look forward. Hard to argue with that. He leads you to the edge of a grove, where the trees form a natural arch overhead. The ground here is soft, blanketed in fallen leaves and low hums from unseen insects. And there, beneath one tree that looks old enough to remember when the sky was still forming, sits a man surrounded by maps. Sort of. They're drawn on bark, cloth, even stretched animal hide. They show no mountains, no rivers, no cities. But they are maps, just not of places you can visit with your feet. Memory maps, the man says without looking up. Spoon paths, of course. He gestures for you to sit, pointing to a smooth patch of earth where a spoon lies on its side. This one is strange, flat, wide, and made of what looks like braided fibers hardened into a bowl. It wouldn't survive a single scoop of soup, but that's not what it's for. He explains that in some families, certain spoons are passed down through generations, not for eating or healing, but for remembering. The family stories, lineage paths, migrations, even marriages and rivalries, all tracked, not with ink, but with spoons. Each indentation on the handle, each notch carved into the bowl, each discoloration or wrapping tells part of story. When a new child is born, a new notch is added. When a marriage occurs, a loop of thread is tied around the neck. When someone passes away, a mark is burned into the back of the bowl. The spoon becomes a living record. You ask if people memorize what the marks mean. He smiles. We don't memorize. We tell. Every new child hears the stories when they eat their first porridge from the family spoon. And again when they get sick. And again when they fall in love. You hold one of the spoons he offers. It's smooth, curved just right to fit your palm. There's a tiny chip near the bowl's edge and a green bead tied into the handle's base. That, he says, was my uncle's attempt at farming. Lasted 6 days. You laugh, then pause. He died. No. He just really hated goats. Historians still debate the extent to which these memory spoons functioned as oral history tools. Some liken them to griots, living libraries who carried community history through song and speech. Others argue the spoons were symbolic only, not precise records. But among the people who still keep them, they're treated with the reverence you'd reserve for heirlooms or small gods. You watch as he smooths a new stretch of cloth and begins drawing lines, spoon trails, he calls them, representing migrations between villages. Each time a family carried their spoon to a new land, the path grew. The spoon teaches you how far you've come, he says, and sometimes how far you've gone from yourself. One map shows a spiral that loops outward, then doubles back sharply. That family left the village for 40 years, he says. When they came back, they brought stories, songs, and one very angry rooster. The spoon remembers it all. You wonder aloud what happens if a family loses their memory spoon. He pauses, then says softly, then the stories must live in the hands, in the way someone stirs a pot, or how they carve a handle. We find pieces of memory everywhere. The spoon just keeps them from scattering too far. You sit quietly with that. Before you leave, he offers you a tiny woven disc, the same material as the spoon. Start your own, he says. Not for your ancestors, for your future self, the one who forgets things. You nod, tuck it away, and as you walk back through the grove, the boy, still walking backward, asks, "Do you remember where we came from?" You say yes. He grins. Good. Now, tell it like a story. The afternoon sun casts everything in amber, as if the world has been gently toasted. The village settles into that peculiar midday silence where even the dogs seem to nap more thoughtfully. You're resting beneath a thatched awning, watching a group of older men slowly, very slowly, construct what appears to be a ceremonial platform, though it might also just be a bench. Hard to tell with this pace. Just when your eyelids begin to droop, a boy runs by with a shout. They're digging up the spoon. Now, that gets your attention. You follow the trail of dust and excitement to the edge of the village, where a small crowd has gathered around a patch of carefully marked earth. A few men are working with simple tools, digging slowly, reverently, as if unearthing treasure. In a sense, they are. Beneath the soil, wrapped in layers of cloth and tucked inside a calabash board, is an old iron spoon, long, weathered, and speckled with rust like a forgotten constellation. The moment it emerges, the atmosphere changes. Laughter fades. People grow quiet, respectful. Someone hums a low, steady note. This isn't just a spoon. This is a burial spoon. You learn that in some communities, spoons are buried with healers, midwives, and spiritual guides. Not as possessions, but as companions. Their work, after all, did not end in life. In death, the spoon serves as witness. In certain cases, when a descendant feels lost or adrift, they may be granted permission, rare, always ceremonial, to retrieve the spoon and ask it questions. The answers don't come in words, of course. They come in dreams, in feelings, in the way the light catches on metal you haven't touched in years. Historians still debate the practice. Some say these burial spoons were more symbolic than functional, buried as tribute, never meant to be unearthed. Others insist that, under strict cultural guidelines, a spoon could be retrieved for guidance, then reburied, ensuring the bond remained intact. One French explorer in the 18th century described a ritual where the spoon of a late herbalist was boiled in herbs to release its memories. He wrote, "The steam carried answers, or at least softened the grief." You watch now as the iron spoon is cleaned with water, then anointed with a mixture of shea and ash. It is not touched barehanded. Even the youngest child in the circle seems to understand the gravity. A woman steps forward, tall, older, wearing a sash the color of rain-soaked clay. She is the granddaughter of the woman buried here, and today is the 5th anniversary of her passing. This unearthing is not for curiosity. It's a request for courage, she says. For clarity. The spoon is held over a small flame. Then, gently, it's dipped into a bowl of water infused with crushed leaves and bits of root. Steam rises. Eyes close. No one speaks for a long time. Then, softly, the woman says, "I already know the answer." Someone nearby nods. She usually did. Afterward, the spoon is wrapped again, re-oiled, and gently lowered back into the earth. A song is sung, not mournful, not exactly joyful, just whole. You don't understand the words, but the feeling sinks deep like warm tea on a cold morning. You ask one of the elders what might happen if the spoon had been kept instead of returned. He frowns. Then it would carry weight it was never meant to bear. You nod. That makes sense. Before you leave, the granddaughter hands you a small stone, smooth and dark, with a single iron shaving embedded in it. To remind you, she says, some questions live underground. As you walk away, the sun dips behind the trees, casting shadows that stretch and sway like lullabies. You feel lighter, but also heavier. You're starting to understand. Spoons don't just serve. They remember. Twilight again. That liminal hour where the day's breath slows and the night's breath hasn't quite begun. The sky purples gently overhead, and a single star blinks awake just above the tree line. You follow the path lit now by the flicker of lanterns, guided by a girl no older than 8, who insists on carrying a small clay pot balanced expertly on her head. She says nothing, just hums, a tune with no beginning and no real end. She leads you to a courtyard enclosed by woven mats and low-hanging fabric. More tent than house, more story than shelter. Inside, you hear soft splashing and the occasional clink of ceramic on wood. The air smells of salt, lemon leaf, and something metallic. Not sharp, just ancient. A woman emerges, arms bare, face calm. She carries a spoon unlike any you've seen yet. It is carved from black stone, polished smooth as river glass. Its bowl deep, its handle short. She calls it the Moon Dipper, and tonight, it's used not for medicine or memory, but for sound. The girl sets down her pot. It's filled with water and a scattering of petals. The woman dips the stone spoon into the pot, lifts it slowly, lets droplets fall back in soft, rhythmic taps. Then again, and again, each movement deliberate, as though she's stirring music from silence. You learn that in this village, certain spoons are used in sound bathing. Rituals where rhythm, repetition, and intention are used to ease troubled minds. Not drumming, not chanting, something gentler. The sound of water, the soft scrape of stone on clay, the resonance of a spoon tapped just so. It's calming, hypnotic. You sit, and she hands you the Moon Dipper. Your turn. You're hesitant. You've never been trained in spoon acoustics, after all. But she nods once, go on. So you dip, lift, let the water fall in droplets. The sound is different than hers. More hesitant, less graceful, but not wrong. She smiles. Every person stirs a different sound, she says. The spoon just reveals the one that already lives in you. Historians still debate the legitimacy of sonic healing practices across West Africa. Some refer to the use of instruments like the balafon or water drums, but fringe accounts suggest smaller tools. Yes, even spoons were used in personal rituals for calming infants, aiding meditation, or cleansing the emotional self after loss. A German anthropologist wrote of a healer who claimed, "The water remembers who we are if you tap it gently enough." You stay there for a while. Talp, talp. The moon rises, silver and slow, casting reflections across the water. The petals drift and swirl. The girl falls asleep beside the pot. The woman tells you that the Moon Dipper has no story of its own. It only tells yours. You ask if that makes it weaker. She laughs, the kind of laugh that feels like a shoulder squeeze. No, it makes it more patient. Before you go, she teaches you a pattern. 5 taps, a swirl, and a slow stir that sends tiny waves rippling outward. Try it when you can't sleep, she says, or when you forget where your mind has wandered to. You nod, holding the spoon carefully, as if it might spill moonlight if tilted wrong. As you step outside, the world feels softer. The breeze is gentler. Even your thoughts, usually racing, have slowed to a whisper. And behind you, somewhere in the tent, a single droplet falls. Talp! The moon rides high now, silver and silent, like it's eavesdropping. You walk beneath it, your feet padded with dust, your breath trailing behind in soft puffs like forgotten questions. The village sleeps in pieces, some still murmuring, some already folded into dreams. But a fire still flickers ahead, and beside it, a man is weaving. Not baskets, not mats, spoons. He doesn't notice you at first. His fingers are too busy working slender reeds into curves, tightening loops, adjusting the neck of a newly forming spoon. You take a seat near the fire and wait. Eventually, He speaks without looking. Don't let people fool you. A spoon doesn't need to be strong. It needs to be shaped by patience. The reeds are pale and pliable, soaking in a small basin nearby. He dips one, bends it, threads it into the growing form. It looks impossibly delicate. You wouldn't trust it to lift soup, let alone medicine. But that's the point. He tells you that woven spoons like these aren't for eating or even stirring. They're for giving. Gifts, often anonymous, left outside someone's home during times of grief, transition, or quiet celebration. They hold nothing except meaning. You pick one up. It's feather-light and smells faintly of wet grass and smoke. These are spoons of intention, he says. You don't give them to say anything. You give them because you're listening. He explains a custom where people weave a spoon overnight and leave it before sunrise at the door of someone they cannot speak to directly. Maybe because of pride, fear, or just distance too long unspoken. The spoon acts as a message. I'm still here. Quiet, but here. You ask how the recipient knows who it's from. They usually don't, he says, and they don't need to. Historians still debate whether this practice was symbolic or ritualized. Some journals mention woven tokens of apology, while others interpret them as courtship offerings. One French naturalist wrote of a village where a man placed one such spoon in a widow's bowl each morning for 7 days before she finally invited him to share breakfast. The weaver hands you a half-finished spoon. Try. You hesitate. Your fingers are all thumbs tonight. But you try. The reeds slip. The loop unravels. He chuckles. Your apology is going to take some practice. You glance at him. How do you know it's an apology? He looks up for the first time. Because you're holding it too tightly. Touché. You relax your grip and try again. Slowly, a shape emerges. Not quite spoon. Not quite bird nest. But something. As the fire pops and crackles beside you, he shares one last tradition. When a weaver passes on, their final spoon, unfinished or not, is placed in a tree near the village, left for the wind and rain. Eventually, it falls apart. That's how you know they've let go, he says. You hold your little not-quite spoon, suddenly aware of how much can be said with things that never speak. Before you leave, he offers you a bundle of reeds, tied with a strip of faded cloth. Try again tomorrow. Or don't. Some people only ever weave one. That's enough. You nod, tucking it gently under your arm. As you walk back through the sleeping paths, moonlight dusts the rooftops like flour on a baker's bench. You glance at your awkward, woven creation and smile. You don't know who it's for yet, but you'll know when the time comes. You wake before the sun, not on purpose. Your dreams just got up and left early, like birds chasing the first hint of light. Outside, the sky is that soft, in-between blue that promises something but doesn't yet say what. The village is quiet, save for one sound, metal tapping metal. Rhythmic, slow, like someone remembering a song more than playing it. You follow the sound to the edge of a field where an old man sits beside a forge that's barely awake. Just a few flickers of coal breathing gently in the wind. He's barefoot, bare-chested, wearing a piece of cloth that's more holes than fabric, and in his hands is a long-handled hammer and, yes, another spoon. But this one is still being born. He doesn't greet you, not with words. Just a nod that means, watch, if you're going to be quiet. And you do. The metal glows faint orange as he taps it into shape on a stone anvil. Not banging, not bashing, just tapping, like he's convincing the spoon, not forcing it. Each strike is followed by a pause, a breath, a murmur you can't quite catch. Maybe a prayer, maybe an argument. Eventually, he speaks. This one's for a river mother. Needs to be wide enough to hold the moon, but not so heavy she sinks it. You decide not to question that sentence. It seems perfectly reasonable at this hour. He explains that in his trade, no two spoons are the same. Each is made for one purpose and one purpose only. Not to be kept, to be sent. People think we make tools, he says. We're making letters. Each spoon carries something, a memory, a warning, a thanks. You ask how he knows when it's finished. He shrugs, when it stops arguing. Historians still debate the relationship between blacksmiths and ritual life in West African medicine. What's clear is that smiths were often more than artisans. They were mediators between worlds. Metal wasn't just metal. It was birth, it was blood, it was power shaped by flame. Some communities believed only certain families could work with iron because of ancestral pacts made centuries prior. The old man lifts the glowing spoon, examines it, and dips it in a bowl of water. Steam hisses. The shape is rough but elegant, almost floral. This one will be used once, he says, to give a dying elder her last medicine. Then it'll be buried in the river. You ask if that makes him sad. He shakes his head. It means I gotta help her leave with dignity. You fall silent after that. Not because there's nothing to say, just because the fire is speaking too. He invites you to try shaping a handle. You grip the hammer awkwardly and miss the rhythm on your first 2 tries. By the third, your strike lands just right. The metal sings, a soft note, but sure of itself. He grins. You got a temper. That's good. But don't make angry spoons. They forget too fast. Eventually, you watch as he engraves a symbol onto the back of the finished piece, a spiral wrapped around a small cross. For remembering and resting, he says. All medicine spoons get a mark. Otherwise, they forget their job. He places the spoon inside a cloth bag, wraps it with string, and sets it gently aside. Then, unexpectedly, he hands you a smaller spoon. Cruder, bent at the neck. This one's a mistake, he says, but it still works. Take it. Stir something good. You bow, unsure how else to thank him. As the sun finally edges above the trees, casting long golden fingers across the forge, you walk away with a spoon shaped by fire, weighty in your hand. Not for use, not for ceremony, not even for memory. Just to remind you, even imperfect things can carry meaning. Even bent spoons can serve. By midday, the heat returns. Not aggressive, just persistent, like a warm hand on your shoulder that never quite lets go. You're back in the shade of a tamarind tree, legs stretched out, your gifted spoons beside you like loyal dogs. It's tempting to rest, to let the rhythm of the village lull you into forgetting that your journey has a shape. But someone taps your foot. She's maybe 6 years old, holding a wooden box with both hands and a look that says, "You're coming with me, no arguments." So you go. She leads you to a one-room school at the far end of the village. Inside, it's cooler, quieter, and filled with children hunched over short tables. In the center, spoons. Everywhere. In baskets, in bowls, laid out in rows. Some real, some carved from soft wood and painted in bright, almost defiant colors. A young teacher greets you with a smile and a chalk-smeared wrapper. "Welcome to Spoon School," she says. "We teach both letters and curves here." You're instantly charmed. She explains, each child is tasked with creating a spoon that reflects something about themselves. Not for eating, but for telling. It could be a happy memory, a fear, a dream. The rule is simple. Carve, paint, or build something that cannot lie. You kneel beside one child, painting flames on the back of a ladle. "What's this?" you ask. He grins. "It's my anger spoon." Fair enough. Another girl is carefully drawing stars on a long, thin spoon. "It finds lost goats," she says proudly. "And lost people too, if you whisper right." Some spoons are playful, others surprisingly somber. One boy carved a crack down the center of his, then filled it with wax and wrapped it in thread. "It broke last week," he says, "but I didn't throw it away." Historians still debate the use of spoon crafting in childhood rites across West Africa. Some say it was a metaphor for growing responsibility, learning to carry, serve, and offer. Others suggest it was a way of encouraging emotional articulation through tactile expression. A 1769 journal mentions learning spoons given to children upon first joining a communal meal, each marked with a symbol representing the family's legacy. Here, the spoons serve as emotional mirrors. One child holds up a spoon with an absurdly large bowl and a handle shaped like a question mark. "Why is it shaped like that?" you ask. He shrugs. "Sometimes you want more answers than food." "Touché, kid." The teacher tells you that at the end of the school term, the children bury their spoons beneath the tree outside. Not as a goodbye, but as a promise. When they come back next year, they dig them up. Some change, some stay the same. That's the real test. You glance at the tree, its base covered in tiny, labeled mounds of dirt. And what if the spoon is missing? Then they carve a new one. And we talk about what got lost. It's simple, beautiful, necessary. Before you go, one of the children hands you a spoon with a wobbly handle and a tiny sun scratched into its bowl. This one is yours, she says. It helps people fall asleep when they're scared. You try to respond, but mostly just manage a half laugh, half gulp. It's an awkward emotional noise. The teacher pats your back. They always know, she says. You step out into the light holding your new spoon. It doesn't feel heavy, just warm. And as you walk back toward the tamarind tree, you think, if every school in the world taught this way, through shape and silence and tiny suns, maybe fewer people would forget how to serve each other. Maybe fewer people would need to be reminded that spoons, like stories, are best when passed along. The afternoon stretches wide and golden, as if the sun itself has grown curious about your journey and decided to linger a little longer. The village exhales in heat waves. Even the chickens walk slower, pecking at the dust like they're procrastinating. You find shade beneath a thick canopy where an elder sits cross-legged beside a wide, shallow bowl. Her fingers are busy grinding herbs with a stone pestle, and beside her, lined up with surgical precision, are 5 spoons. Each one is different. One is horn, worn smooth and thin at the edges. Another is brass, marked with tiny notches like tally marks. A third is gourd, its bowl flaking at the edges. The last 2 are made of wood, one charred black at the tip, the other stained green from years of something. She doesn't speak right away, just nods once, then gestures for you to sit. This, she says, motioning to the spoons, is my medicine shelf. You glance at the spoons again. No labels, no compartments, just 5 stories waiting to be stirred. She explains that in her practice, the spoon is as vital as the herb, not just for measurement or mixing, but for direction. Each spoon has a different voice, and she chooses which to use not based on the illness, but on the energy of the patient. You don't feed grief with the horn spoon, she says. It clings. The brass one, she uses for transitions, endings, beginnings, decisions that need anchoring. It weighs more, she says, so the mind takes it seriously. The gourd spoon? That one's for new mothers and anxious dreamers. Soft hands, soft hearts, she says. They need a tool that gives more than it takes. The charred spoon is for fear. She stirs only once with it. It reminds the body it's already survived fire. You hesitate. And the green one, she smiles. That one listens more than it speaks. Historians still debate the extent to which specific utensils were used in ritual healing. Most agree that spiritual and herbal practices across West Africa often involve personalized tools, calabashes, bowls, even ladles, but some argue that the spoon's role was secondary to the ingredients. Yet oral accounts like this one suggest otherwise. In certain circles, the spoon channeled the medicine, giving it not just direction, but temperament. You watch as she stirs a thick paste with the horn spoon, whispering to it as she folds the mixture. You can't hear the words, but the rhythm is soothing, like reciting an old recipe from memory while the wind leans in to listen. She asks if you want to try. You do. You reach for the wooden spoon, the green one, and she gives a nod of approval. Gentle hands, she says. Let it teach you. You stir slowly, feeling the resistance of the paste, the weight of time inside the bowl. The herbs smell sharp, with hints of citrus and smoke. Now say something true, she says. You blink. About what? She shrugs. Yourself. You think for a moment. Then say it. The spoon doesn't change, but something in the paste loosens, as if your words helped unlock a stubborn thread. She nods again. That's how you know it's working. Later, she tells you that every apprentice is expected to carve their own spoon before they're allowed to treat a patient. Not because of tradition, because the hand must meet the soul somewhere. The carving is where it begins. Some use knives, some use fire. Some just wait until the wood wants to become a spoon. Before you leave, she hands you a tiny satchel of herbs wrapped in cloth. For clarity, she says, and tea. Then, almost as an afterthought, she adds, if you ever forget yourself, stir water with your spoon. Let it tell you what it remembers. You thank her deeply, and as you walk away, you glance at the green-handled spoon in your bag. quiet, listening, patient. It doesn't speak, but it definitely knows something. Evening again, you're third, maybe fourth in this village, though time here doesn't tick, it drifts. It slips between woven mats and cooking fires, carried in the rhythm of pestles and the hush of passing breezes. You no longer check the hour. The sun tells you what you need to know. Tonight, they've invited you to a dance. But not just any dance. This one is known as the Spoon Circle. At first, it sounds like a quaint metaphor. But no, it's literal. You arrive at the central clearing, and there it is, a wide circle marked with chalky white symbols and surrounded by unlit lanterns. In the center, a small stool holds a single wooden spoon, long-handled, polished from years of touch, with a red thread tied around the neck. There's a quiet anticipation in the air, like the village is holding its breath. The drummers begin slowly, low and steady, like the heartbeat of something ancient waking up. The lanterns flicker to life. Then the dancers step in, 12 of them, all carrying spoons. Not for show, not props. These are the real thing. Some carved, some metal, one clearly made for bone. Each one different, each held with reverence. You ask an elder standing beside you what this is. He smiles. It's how we remember the unspoken. The Spoon Circle, he explains, is performed only a few times each year, usually during the harvest, or when a child is named, or when someone dies. It's a dance of lineage and offering. Each dancer represents a story, and each spoon carries a memory. They move in slow, sweeping motions, passing their spoons from one to another. Not always in rhythm, but always with purpose. One dancer kneels and presses her spoon to the earth. Another holds it above his head, as if weighing the sky. A third twirls, her spoon spinning with her, catching candlelight like a mirrored fish. You notice there are no words, no chants, no explanations, just movement, memory made visible. Then something strange happens. A dancer steps out of the circle and approaches the center. He kneels before the stool, lifts the central spoon, and places his own beside it. Everyone pauses. The drums stop. Someone in the crowd exhales loudly. Then, the man stands and returns to the circle, now spoonless. You lean toward the elder. Did he give it up? The elder nods. It's done when your spoon has finished speaking. Historians still debate the meaning of the Spoon Circle. Some interpret it as a symbolic passing of roles, elders to youth, healers to apprentices. Others argue it's more spiritual, a form of ancestral communion. A British colonial report from 1898 described a silent ritual of utensil-bearing dancers, though the observer completely missed the point and concluded it was a wedding rehearsal. Tonight, you understand it better. This isn't just performance. This is language without sound, emotion without mouth. It's a conversation in curves and wood grain. You notice that not everyone in the audience is still. Some sway, some close their eyes. One woman quietly weeps, not with sadness, but with the kind of release that follows understanding. A few children mimic the dancers in miniature, spoons tucked under their arms like sleeping birds. And then, the final round. Each dancer stops, steps forward, and places their spoon beside the one in the center. They don't look at the audience. They don't look at each other. They just let go. By the time the circle closes, the stool holds a pile of spoons that shimmer with sweat, candle wax, and something you can't quite name. Maybe gratitude. Maybe goodbye. The drumming stops. The lanterns dim. No applause. No words. Just a hush that follows something holy. As the dancers leave, the elder turns to you. If you ever need to remember who you are, he says, don't write it down. Dance it with your spoon. You nod, heart full and throat tight. You don't know if you'll ever truly understand this place, or its stories, or its spoons. But you know you've been changed by them. And that's enough. The morning after the Spoon Circle feels different. The village has shifted, not visibly, not in any way you could explain, but like a house that's been cleaned while you slept. The air smells of charcoal and tamarind, and the sky is that gentle gray-blue of early light slipping through thin clouds. You rise slowly, stretch, and find something curious outside your door. A single spoon laid on a folded scrap of indigo cloth. It's familiar. You've seen it before, one of the dancer's spoons from last night. But why it's here now, you can't say. There's no note, just the spoon, and the faintest scent of lemongrass. You carry it with you as you walk to the far side of the village, where the land opens into fields and quiet gardens. A woman is bent low, tending to a line of plants with thick leaves and tiny white flowers. When she sees the spoon in your hand, she laughs softly. "He gave it to you," she says, not surprised. "It's ready for a new story." You join her in the garden. She's tending to herbs, some for eating, many for healing, and a few, she says, just to remember where we came from. She teaches you their names, though they slip through your memory like smooth stones in a stream. Except for one. Could be a leaf with a bitter scent that's boiled for grief. She motions for you to help. And so, with your new spoon, you begin to measure soil, scoop water, mix powdered bark into a bowl of clay and ash. She watches you work, nodding with approval. You measure gently, she says. That's a good sign. Here, spoons are more than tools. They're bridges. A spoon in this garden might deliver medicine to the sick, or mix dye for mourning cloth, or scoop the final handful of grain before a new season begins. The same spoon can serve hope, sorrow, and celebration. It all depends on the hand holding it. Historians still debate how gardening and healing were interlinked in these communities. Some written records dismiss them as separate domains, practical versus spiritual, but oral tradition insists otherwise. The healer's garden is not just a pharmacy, it's an emotional atlas. Each plant is a chapter, each spoonful of soil a sentence. You pause to smell a cluster of mint, and she chuckles. That one's for waking up heavy dreams. Later, she takes you to a low stone platform at the garden's edge, where broken spoons have been laid gently in rows. Some snapped at the handle, others burned or bent, all of them honored. "We call this the spoon rest," she says. You ask if they're buried. She shakes her head. "No, just left. Some stories don't need to be hidden, just allowed to end." She picks up one, small, brass, half-melted. This one belonged to my mother. She stirred porridge with it every morning. One day it cracked in the fire, and she said, "Finally, I've done enough." She sets it back down with care. You sit beside her, running your fingers along the indigo cloth your spoon arrived in. She tells you indigo is the color of transition, neither mourning nor joy, just movement. The man who danced last night, she says, gave you his spoon because it was ready to speak again, but not in his voice. You hold the spoon up to the light. Its bowl is slightly chipped. Its handle is dark with age, but it feels alive, like it's waiting. "Try it," she says. "Plant something." So you do. You scoop a little soil, press in a seed she hands you, tiny, round, and striped like a miniature melon. You cover it gently. You don't say anything profound, but the act feels like a vow. As you stand to leave, she says, "That story has just begun. Come back to see what it becomes." You walk back toward the village with your gifted spoon, a little dirt under your fingernails, and a growing feeling that these people have been slowly folding you into their tale. Not as a guest, as a line in the story. The day unfolds like old parchment, warm, creased with memory, and full of quiet corners. You're walking now without direction, just following where the wind nudges, where curiosity tilts your head. Past gardens, past homes, past drying lines of cloth that flutter like whispering flags. Eventually, you hear music. Not drums this time. Something softer. Wooden pipes. A low, humming string instrument. Laughter, too. Not loud, just the kind that trickles through a place like water through stone. You find them on a hillside, a circle of women seated on woven mats, legs folded, spoons in hand. But they aren't dancing. They aren't cooking. They're playing. One woman taps rhythmically against a gourd. Another uses her spoon like a bow across a length of stretched wire. A third just spins hers on the mat, watching it wobble and settle like a coin deciding its fate. You're invited without words. They make space for you. Hand you a spoon. It's bone, delicate, warm from the sun, worn smooth where many fingers have rested. You sit. They continue their music. Not rehearsed, not in sync even, but harmonious, improvised, like the spoons are telling secrets and the women are laughing along with them. After a while, one woman speaks. Her voice is low, musical. These are the spoons of the unburdened. You tilt your head. She continues. They've done their work. Carried medicine, fed children, stirred grief into soup. Now they rest. They play. We bring them back to joy. You hadn't realized spoons might need joy. Historians still debate the existence of these play gatherings. Some dismiss them as idle rituals, women passing time. Others argue they were a kind of therapy, an early form of community care, especially for widows, mothers, or women between stages of life. One Portuguese trader observed a laughter circle in 1751 where women tapped ladles in rhythm and called it stirring the sky. You ask if every spoon here has a story. They all nod. Of course. One belonged to a woman who delivered 50 babies. One was used only to feed those who couldn't feed themselves. One, they say, once held rainwater during a drought and was offered to the sky in thanks. Some spoons, one woman says, serve without ever touching food. There's a pause. Then laughter. You're not sure why, but you laugh too. A woman beside you shows you a trick. If you flick the edge of a certain kind of spoon just right, it hums like a tuning fork. She taps out a simple rhythm. You copy her, clumsily at first, but eventually you find the beat. The group nods in approval, grinning. It's not about precision. It's about showing up. Later, you ask if you can leave your broken woven spoon here, the one you made awkwardly on your second day. The oldest woman pats your knee. Of course, this is where tired spoons come to smile. You set it down gently in a woven basket filled with others. Cracked, chipped, burned, beautiful. Then, without planning to, you dance. Just a little. A slow circle. Spoon in hand. Feet in dust. Breath light. You realize something. You've stopped thinking about what's next. About where you're going. You're just here. With the spoons. And the music. And the wind. As the sun dips low, the women begin to pack up. They kiss your cheek. They press petals into your palm. One braids a tiny string into your hair. Red thread. Like the one tied around the dancer's spoon. For remembering play, she says. You walk home slowly. Your pockets are fuller than when you arrived. But your heart, lighter. And the spoon you now carry? It hums just a little when the breeze hits it right. By now, walking through the village feels like gliding through a half-remembered song. Everyone knows your face. Every corner holds a scent you can name. And every moment has a spoon-shaped shadow hiding somewhere inside it. Today, you're invited to visit a hut near the water's edge. Not flashy, just round, thatch quiet. There's a sign above the door, a swirl inside a bowl. You've seen it scratched on the handles of older spoons before. You ask someone nearby what it means. That's where the forgetting goes, they say. You pause, then step inside. It's dim but not dark. The air smells like paper bark and warm stone. There are shelves lining the walls, some holding jars, others holding spoons. Hundreds of them. Old ones, wrapped ones, some so brittle they look like they'd turn to powder in your hand. And all of them tagged, marked with bits of dyed thread or carved initials. A woman is seated at a low table, sorting a bundle of new ones, her movements careful, almost tender. This is the spoon archive, she says. The ones that shouldn't be forgotten, but don't need to be carried anymore. You sit beside her. She shows you a spoon made from river clay, its bowl cracked clean through the middle, then mended with sap and string. This one belonged to a boy who stopped speaking when his brother died. He stirred his food in silence for 2 years before he said a word. When he did, he gave the spoon to his grandmother and said, "It helped me talk." You ask what she does with all these. I remember them. I let them rest. Some spoons, she tells you, are brought here by families. Others arrive anonymously, left at the doorstep like offerings. Some are too damaged to be traced. But it doesn't matter. Every spoon here has held something sacred, even if only for a moment. She points to a tiny iron spoon, barely the length of your finger. That one served the king his final meal. And another, made of pale driftwood, that one never touched food. It was worn on a cord around the neck of a midwife during every birth. Historians still debate whether such archives ever existed. Most assume these stories are exaggerations, metaphors. But the oral tradition insists that sacred objects, especially those connected to healing and care, were not discarded. but retired. Like ancestors, like songs. One account from a 1780s traveler mentions a room of quiet spoons where a woman prayed before choosing one to stir a funeral broth. Here, the spoons rest like books in a library, not to be used, but never to be erased. The woman shows you a blank ledger. We don't write their stories down unless they've been told. But if you know one, we'll add it. You hesitate, then reach in your bag and pull out the bone spoon from the spoon circle. You place it on the table. She raises an eyebrow. Are you sure it's finished? She asks. You think. Hold it in your palm. The hum is still faint, but quieter now. Not gone, just settled. You nod. She wraps it in a strip of soft cloth, ties it with green thread, and writes your name, just your first, on a tiny tag. It'll rest here, she says, but it'll always remember. Before you leave, she hands you a fresh spoon. Simple wood, unused. What's this one for? You ask. She smiles. The next story, you step outside with a new spoon in your hand, the wind tugging gently at your sleeves. The sky is beginning to turn gold. The river glimmers like someone stirred it with a sunbeam. And somewhere behind you, in the quiet shadows of that little round hut, a spoon exhales. You wander now with less urgency. Each footstep is slower, not from fatigue, but reverence. This village, its stories, its people, its spoons, has pressed something soft and enduring into your spirit, like a thumbprint in warm clay. You're no longer just visiting. You're remembering. By late afternoon, you arrive at a quiet compound near the base of the hills. There's no music, no chatter, just the sound of sweeping, long strokes of a broom over packed dirt. A man with silver in his beard stands barefoot at the edge of the courtyard, watching you with an amused tilt to his head. You're the one they say listens well, he says. You try not to look too pleased. He gestures for you to follow, and you enter a low, open room shaded with palm fronds. Inside, dozens of spoons arranged in spirals on the floor. Each one has a stone resting in its bowl. You've seen the spoons that serve, he says, but these are the ones that carry silence. You kneel beside the nearest spiral. The spoon is blackened, almost charred, and the stone in its bowl is a dull red, flecked with white. You reach toward it. Don't touch yet, he says gently. Let it tell you something first. So you sit, listen, and somehow, without words, you feel it. Wait, grief, but also peace. Not silence as emptiness, but silence as a pause. A necessary hush before a new breath. He explains that each spoon in this space represents a vow never spoken aloud, a moment of restraint, a choice to hold rather than act. There are spoons of stillness, each used once, in a moment when speech or action would have failed. You glance around. There must be 100 of them. One man used his to refuse revenge after his son was taken, he says. He stirred no soup that night, just placed a spoon in the fire and Saturday. Another, he tells you, was left by a woman who chose not to expose a lover's betrayal. She carried the knowledge like water in a cupped palm, and when she was ready, she gave the spoon away. These, he says, are not stories of heroes. These are stories of holding back. That kind of courage doesn't wear a crown. Historians still debate whether silence was ritualized in West African healing and memory practice. But among oral historians, there's a phrase. When the spoon doesn't stir, the heart is speaking louder. It reflects a cultural reverence for the power of stillness, when what you don't say or do can hold more meaning than action itself. The man invites you to choose a spoon and sit with it. You pick a small, dark one, its bowl cracked, but carefully mended with resin. The stone inside it is soft gray, smooth as river glass. As you sit with it, something uncoils inside you. A memory you hadn't realized you were carrying. A moment when you, too, held your tongue, walked away, chose peace over pride. He watches you, then nods. You brought something of your own. Leave here if you're ready. You pause. Then you lift your unused wooden spoon, the one given to you in the archive, and gently place it in the spiral. It's not old. It's barely begun, but somehow it belongs here. He nods again, says nothing. Together, you sweep the floor around the spiral, slow strokes. dust rising, then settling. A quiet ritual. No intense, no drums, just breath and stillness. Before you leave, he offers you a final gift, a pebble. Light brown, smooth, warmed by the sun. This is not for weight, he says. It's for balance. You thank him, genuinely, and slip the pebble into your pocket. As you walk back toward the village, the breeze carries the hush of that room with you. The world feels quieter now, not because it lacks sound, but because you've learned how to hear beneath the noise. Some spoons stir, some carry, some simply wait, and some teach us how to be still. The sun is beginning to loosen its grip, casting long shadows across the dusty path as you find yourself drawn toward the outer edge of the village, where the trees thicken and the breeze smells faintly of moss and something older. You follow a trail marked not by signs, but by bits of cloth tied to branches and faint footprints that know exactly where they're going. Eventually, you come upon a clearing where time feels different, slower, a little sideways. At the center stands a tall tree with wide arms and roots like ancient fingers reaching into the earth. Beneath it sits a man so still, you nearly mistake him for part of the tree. His back is straight, his eyes half closed, and resting in his lap is the largest spoon you've seen yet. Nearly the length of his arm, carved from deep brown wood, polished by years of weather and touch. You sit across from him quietly. He opens his eyes and nods once. You've come far, he says, not as a question, but as a statement of simple fact. He gestures to the spoon. This is the listening spoon. You raise an eyebrow. It doesn't stir. It doesn't serve. It listens. That is its only purpose. You glance around. There's nothing else here. No herbs, no fire, no stills. Just the tree, the man, and the spoon. He continues. When people are lost, they come here and speak. Not for answers, just to hear their own voice say the truth. He places the spoon in the dirt between you, its bowl facing upward. If you have something to say, now's the time. And strangely, you do. At first, it's halting, just fragments. A word, a sigh, a half sentence. But then it flows. You speak of things you've seen here, things you've remembered, even things you've long kept sealed in the back drawers of your chest. The man says nothing. The spoon, of course, says nothing. But you swear the wind grows gentler as you speak. Like the trees themselves are leaning in to listen. Historians still debate the ceremonial use of listening vessels in West African spiritual practices. While bowls and drums are frequently recorded, spoons are less mentioned, perhaps because their use was subtle, deeply personal. One early missionary once wrote of a silence grove where villagers confessed their dreams into carved utensils before burying them. When you finish speaking, the man reaches into a leather pouch and pulls out a tiny bead. Place this in the bowl, he says. You do. The bead makes the faintest tick as it lands, like the soft closing of a thought. This is how it remembers, he says. One bead for each voice. When the bowl fills, we bury it. The spoon starts over. You look closer. There are already many beads, tiny pieces of people resting together in quiet understanding. The man leans back. Now you carry it too. You glance down. He's not talking about the spoon. He's talking about everything. This journey, these stories, the weight and lightness of knowing things you can never unknow. You sit for a long time afterward, letting the hush of the grove settle over you like a warm shawl. Before you leave, he places the spoon back in his lap and closes his eyes once more. You turn, walk slowly out of the clearing, and as you pass under the last cloth-tied branch, you realize there are stories we tell, there are stories we serve, and then there are stories we simply hold, like a spoon in still hands. It's nearing twilight when you return to the heart of the village. That in-between hour when the light leans golden and everything feels just a little enchanted, like the world is exhaling at the end of a very long sentence. People are gathering. You follow the hum of conversation, the scent of roasted yam and something sweet bubbling in clay pots, until you reach a wide circle lit by lanterns and lined with mats. There's laughter in the air, a warm, humming kind, Children dart between legs with sticky fingers and wooden toys. Elders sit at the edges, nodding, watching. And at the center, yes, of course, are spoons. Dozens, maybe more, arranged on a woven cloth, all facing outward like the rays of sun. Some you recognize. One has a chip you carve yourself. Another is unmistakably the anger spoon from the school. You spot the green-handled one from the medicine woman's pouch. A few are strangers, but they all carry the same quiet gravity. Someone notices you and grins. You made it just in time. You sit near the edge of the cloth, cross-legged. A woman in blue steps forward. In her hands, a pot of thick, dark stew, fragrant with ginger and smoked pepper. She kneels, selects a spoon from the sunburst, stirs 3 slow circles, and serves a small bowl to the man beside her. Then he does the same, picks a different spoon, a different bowl, a different rhythm. Around and around it goes. Not a feast, a ritual of remembering. You're handed a bowl, eventually. It's simple, warm, spiced just enough to wake up your tongue. The spoon handed to you is gourd, faded but sturdy, and it fits in your hand like a handshake from an old friend. Someone leans over. "This is how we close the season," she whispers. "With gratitude, with what fed us." Historians still debate whether such ceremonies were culinary or spiritual, or both. The shared meal, the ritual stirring, the careful choosing of spoons. Some claim it's a harvest rite, others a form of communal storytelling. But what's consistent is the intention. Every spoon used tonight has a past. And every person here knows they're participating in more than dinner. The woman in blue begins to speak. Not loudly, just enough to quiet the room. She tells a story of a young girl who stirred river water every day to ask for her mother's safe return. Of a midwife who whispered prayers into her spoon before each birth. Of a boy who carved his first spoon from fallen fig wood, only to find it broken the next day. Then discovered, years later, that his father had secretly kept it. Every story, she says, is a vessel. Every vessel leaves a trace. There's silence. Then a child asks, "Do spoons dream?" The elders laugh. The blue-clad woman just smiles. Only if you stir the stars. As night deepens, the meal winds down. Spoons are gently placed back into the sunburst. Some wrapped in cloth. Some kissed oddly but sweetly. You stand. You've said no formal goodbye, but it's understood. This moment, this journey, is nearly complete. Someone hands you a final gift. A spoon, freshly carved, light, plain, but with a spiral engraved in the bowl, just like the one above the spoon archive door. For your next story, they say, you trace the spiral with your thumb, and something in you settles. It's not the end, but it is enough for tonight. Night has fully arrived. The stars are out in full regalia now, pinpricks of old fire stitched into the velvet dome above you. Somewhere nearby, someone is humming. A soft, tuneless melody. Maybe a lullaby, maybe a memory with notes. You walk alone now for the first time in days. Not because you're apart, but because the path calls for stillness. For reflection. For integration. In your hand, the newly carved spiral spoon rests gently. It isn't heavy. In fact, it feels light enough to float. Yet somehow, it contains the weight of every moment you've lived here. You reach the tamarind tree, the first place you truly sat and listened. Its silhouette glows faintly silver in the starlight. You sit, and slowly, gently, as if narrating to the dark sky itself, you begin to whisper, not words of awe or amazement, but small details. You speak of the anger spoon painted in fire, of the green-handled one that listens more than it speaks, of the quiet boy who poured silence into a broken bowl and called it healing, of the dancer who gave you a spoon because it had finished its song, of the garden where grief grew next to mint, of the man who collected vows that never made it into language, and of the woman who reminded you to laugh, even when spoons hum off-key. The spiral spoon sits in your lap. You turn it slowly between your fingers. Historians still debate whether any of this truly happened, whether spoons were ever treated with such reverence, whether a ceremony of ladles and laughter could ever bear the weight of lineage. But you know, and perhaps the truth isn't in the records. Perhaps it's in the feeling of that carved curve against your palm, the echo of drumming feet beneath moonlight, the trace of lemongrass and yam and something older still. You close your eyes. The breeze returns, soft, mischievous, as if the trees are chuckling. And in that moment, you realize you're no longer a visitor to the story. You're a part of the whisper that carries it forward. And now, we rest. You stay a little longer beneath the tamarind tree, its branches arching above like gentle arms. The spiral spoon lies beside you in the dust, catching moonlight in its carved bowl. Everything is still, except the soft chorus of night insects and the occasional flutter of a distant bird shifting in sleep. The village, the voices, the spoons, all of it begins to drift backward, like the receding tide of a dream you'll remember without trying. Even the stories feel hushed now, content to be held in silence rather than spoken. You breathe deeper, slower, each inhale like drawing in warm smoke from a low fire. Each exhale a letting go. You feel it, don't you? That gentle weightlessness that comes just before sleep. Like your limbs are there, but not required, like your thoughts have curled up beside you and decided to nap. And as your eyelids begin their slow descent, you picture that spiral, the one carved into your spoon, into your memory. Not a destination, not a beginning, just motion. Slow, soft, unending motion. Like breath, like dreams, like moonlight stretching across still water. And in that long, quiet drift between one thought and the next, you surrender, gracefully, completely, to rest. Good night.